Tune in next week for the start of our next mini-series, Da Capo Conversations 2.0. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we begin our Da Capo Conversations 2.0, a mini-series where we'll be giving familiar segments a topical twist. Today we revisit Angélica Negrón's and Carla Lucero's perspectives on their musical journey and background. Here's what Angélica Negrón had to say.
I started playing piano when I was young, around 7, and I would mostly play the songs from Disney musicals, like Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and a little bit of classical, but just mostly those Disney tunes. And then I started playing violin. I started the Conservatory of Music in Puerto Rico, which is where I was born and raised. And I played in orchestras my whole life, and I always loved the violin, but never saw myself as a concert violinist. But I just kept doing it because I really loved music. But I was really curious about the sounds around me and the environment, also really curious about the other instruments in the orchestra. But I just didn't know what that meant for me. I always played music by that white man. And even though I obviously had a love for that music and I enjoyed playing it, there was always this kind of missing piece that my curiosity as a person was not really being fulfilled in the music I was making. So I started playing music in bands, mostly very active in the DIY scene in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, and started making my own music while I was also studying violin. And then around that same time, I started studying film in the University of Puerto Rico. That's where I met a lot of my friends that I was making music with. And through films, I discovered film music. And then through film music, I discovered the music of living composers. At the same time, also, I was listening to a lot of Bang on a Can records, Kronos Quartet, just a lot of discoveries of things that were really important for me as an artist. And through that, I realized that there were living people making music, and that my curiosity for the sounds around me and for other instruments did not mean that I just wasn't sure what instrument I wanted to play and that I was lost as a performer, but mostly that what I wanted to do was to write for all these instruments, and also at the same time found out that there was a composition department in the conservatory. It was very small. It was all male at that time, so I joined the composition department. I switched from violin to composing, and that was it. I kind of never looked back after that.
Here's what Carla Lucero had to say.
Well, I was told that I came out of the womb as a musical person. My parents told me that when I was a baby, they'd be singing a tune, on the radio, and there's the radio going, and they'd be singing, and my little hand would pop up and over their mouths if they hit the wrong note. So rude. So they would purposely sometimes sing the wrong notes just to watch, to see what
kid reaction.
Yeah. And then also my dad had an accordion, and he said that he would play high notes and something kind of peppy, and I would be very happy. And then he'd play the low notes and I'd start crying, and so they knew that I was very musical, at a very young age. So they started me on piano lessons at 4 years old.
Early.
Yeah, early, because they couldn't keep me away from musical instruments. They'd lose me in department stores and find me, and those old department stores where there were actually musical instruments. They'd find me like reaching up, trying to play the piano and whatever was there. I outgrew my teacher pretty quickly at about 9, and then I was officially on the track to become a concert pianist.
Hmm.
Started taking lessons from another amazing teacher, and so when I auditioned for Cal Arts, I got in as a piano major. All throughout this time, though, my special childhood and adolescence, I was writing little tunes.
Hmm.
I always had music in my head, and because I had the piano lessons, I could jot down melodies and all of that. What I found out, though, in college later on, was that I wasn't being trained theoretically. I was being trained as a technician.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, but really not understanding what was happening, the theory behind what I was playing,
Hmm.
and then writing. I basically, they were melodies, but I didn't understand. Like I would write accompaniment, but I really didn't understand what I was writing. So, but I knew I wanted to be a composer. I'm deathly afraid of performing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, lots of performance anxiety. So, but I thought, A, I didn't think there were any living composers. And B, I thought, my God, oh, woman, I'm nuts. So my first year of being a piano major, I audited composition courses, theory classes in particular, because I thought, what is this? What is this? The theory and all of that. And I audited the classes and understood what the professors were expecting of their students. So I put my portfolio together in the first year as a piano major, and then transferred or made my changed my major to composition, and they got me in as a second year student because I
Wow.
was able to write a pretty good portfolio. um, but as soon as I got there, and I noticed this when I was auditing the classes, there was not a woman in sight. You know, not any students, nor the professors. You
Hmm.
know, all men, and to add to that, no people of color
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only time I would encounter people of color um, was in more of like the general music courses, people who are not really specializing, students are not specializing in either performance or composition. It's just,
Hmm. Hmm.
overall
General ed.
musical education. Yeah. And yeah, but in terms of um, my fellow students in my major, I was the only woman and I was the only person of color.
Wow.
It was insane. And I remember when I told my parents that I had changed my major, my mom said, "I'm gonna kill myself." I swear. She thought my life was over because I wasn't going to be a pianist, and they invested everything in that dream. But then also, and then my dad asked, are there living composers? It was like me saying I want to be a unicorn,
Right.
basically.
Right.
You know, it was really difficult because I felt, and my parents always supported me, no matter what, but this was a real hard left, for them.
Yeah.
As for my professors, they were supportive. And there were women in the performance,
Yeah.
as performance majors, a lot of them. Yeah, but yeah, just in composition, I was it. So yeah,
Wow.
and then I learned about Pauline Oliveros.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, there is a woman composer. So I was like, oh, I gotta, find out more about her. And that kind of led me on a journey where I could find some role models. But in terms of having a role model there during my education, no, I didn't have that.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure's Da Capo Conversations, and a special thank you to our guests for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.